Why don't we get started? We have a good group here already. So welcome everyone. My name is Mary-Eleanor Power, and I am the Director of Marketing Communications with Dalhousie University's College of Continuing Education in Halifax, Nova Scotia. And I am joining you from my kitchen, and I'm sure many of you are working from home as well. So delighted that you could all be with us today. I would just like to begin by acknowledging that Dalhousie University is located in Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq. We are all treaty people. So thank you for joining us for today's webinar, How Do You Lead Yourself? We hope you'll enjoy the next 30 minutes. And if you have questions, please add them to the chat, and we'll save some time at the end to address them. And now, without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to our host and our instructor, Rita Wuebbeler. Rita is the president and founder of Interglobe Cross-Cultural Business Services, where she helps leaders of global organizations and global virtual teams reach their highest performance potential. She lived in Canada for 4 years, but is now living in the US in Atlanta, Georgia. And she's been teaching personal leadership for over 15 years. As well, she's been an instructor at the College of Continuing Education for close to 10 years. Teaching a variety of courses, including Mindfulness at Work, a course to be offered in November. And most recently, she'll be teaching, or soon, she'll be teaching our personal leadership course, which inspired this webinar. And she'll be teaching this in mid-October. So I will pass it over to Rita to walk us through, and then we'll save some time for Q&A at the end. Thank you, Rita.
Thank you so much. And I think there's some confusion about chat versus Q&A for the questions. The Q&A is visible to all. The chat is not only to us, I think, as panelists. So maybe it's good to put the questions.
So then perhaps you can certainly add your questions to the Q&A.
Yeah, great.
Yeah.
Okay,
and
perfect.
Nikki just has asked a question, are we muted? Yes, you are muted. Thanks, Nikki.
So good morning again, good afternoon, and so happy that you decided to spend the next 30 minutes with us here. Thanks, Mary-Eleanor, for introducing myself and for giving us, or me, the chance to talk to you out there online in this new world of ours. And I'm glad that the hurricane didn't do, hopefully, not a lot of damage. So wherever you are, be safe. That's the most important thing these days. Yeah, so I've been doing this class for 8 years at Dalhousie. This is the first year where I had to go virtual or online. We did a run through in June and it went really well. And so here we are again online soon. But I also assume that some of you came just to hear about personal leadership and not necessarily about the class. So there's the two goals here, to introduce you to personal leadership and then also to the class, but that's going to come at the end. So my first question would be to you, when you hear personal leadership, what do you think about, or what do you think is an element of personal leadership? If you can just write that in the Q&A section, though, we can all see it. I'm curious to see what you think it is, what you make of it, what is an element of personal leadership. So if you could take to the Q&A for just a second and write some of your answers, that'd be great. Not getting any responses. Is that because people are not hearing me? Or
there are some who are responding in the chat and some who are in the Q&A.
Okay, then maybe we'll just do the
Yeah,
chat.
Which is
chat
fine.
is fine. Perfect. Being able to lead a team, awareness of self, keeping yourself motivated, self-control, being confident, empathy. Those are all great elements. Resilience, curiosity, lead by cultivating others, integrity, being teachable. Wonderful. Thank you. It's just pouring in now. Awareness. So all of these things are totally correct. When you Google personal leadership, you get about something like 66 million answers or hits. So it's a term that's used widely, but everybody has their own definition to it. So that's really one of the characteristics of personal leadership. And by the way, I'm going to use the abbreviation PL from now on, just to be able to refer to it in a sort of a shorthand way. my definition, or the one that, not mine, but that we in our community of PL facilitators use, comes out of the realm of intercultural communication. And that's where the whole methodology was created from about 20 years ago now, in working with international students and participants in international learning events. There was the desire to pretty much create an atmosphere of collaboration instead of conflict. So when people came together to create international learning events, what happened is that there was soon fighting would be breaking out. And these people who had the intention of living together and working together peacefully wouldn't really do that. And so out of that, there's 3 creators of personal leadership, Barbara Shetty, Sheila Ramsey, and Gordon Watanabe. They kind of put their heads together and looked at the libraries and said, okay, what is it we can use from our knowledge, from our wisdom, that might help people to be not so reactive, but being more intentional about their responses. And this is where the framework came from. And it's basically a way to, I always say, reduce your reactivity, lead yourself, and make choices about how you show up in a situation of where you have to deal with differences or handle conflict. And all the elements that you put in there in the chat, curiosity, resilience, empathy, they're all part of that. So let me show the definition that we use in personal leadership in the PL world, which is this one. Sorry, one more time, back here. Going too fast, sorry. I'm handling the chat as well as my slides. This is a moment of awkwardness, which is allowed, I think, these days. So we're calling it a framework of 2 principles and 6 practices that's designed to help us stay connected to inspiration and creativity in the face of the new and the unfamiliar. So that's a mouthful, but really it breaks down to being able to, in a situation of when something is up, as we say, when there's an issue, a problem, a quandary, a conflict, or just a moment of indecision, to go back to these to this framework, and fairly quickly, the more you practice, the quicker it gets, being able to discern, what am I supposed to do here? Discern what we call my right action. So in a situation of potential stress or heat, or something is up, being able to lead yourself in a way that gives you the best outcome. I've used this framework for the past 15 years. I've been teaching it for about almost as long, or maybe 12 years or so. And it's one of the tools that I use basically to navigate life. That's not the only one. And when you see what it is, you see that it's not really anything different than you might already be thinking about when you think about dealing with stress or dealing with situations where there's uncertainty. So these are all common sense kind of things, but they're not necessarily common practice. So that's where the framework comes in handy, because it gives us a framework with these 6 practices and 2 principles to do it in a way that's more intentional. So what am I talking about? It is at the core this decision you're having to make when you are faced with a situation where there's difference or conflict. So let's say you're a leader and or you're a team member, shall we say, and your team leader gives you a task that doesn't sit well with you, or you have a conflict with a colleague, and you have a choice at that point. Do what I've always done, operating from what we would call perhaps autopilot, from my habit, which gives me the results I can sort of almost expect, sometimes good, sometimes not so good. Or do I take a moment out and at that moment intentionally decide which way I'm going to go, either the old way, quote unquote, or find a different way that might be more creative or more efficient in the end in terms of outcome. So this is what we call the personal leadership choice point, or PL choice point. And one of the premises or the fundamental beliefs in PL is that we have a choice about our reaction. So, and if you don't believe that, then there would be a wider way for you to get to this point of using this methodology or approach. But I think we all can agree that we can't control our emotions necessarily, but we can control how we react to them. That's really what the differentiation is, if that makes sense. All right, then please use the chat. I see people writing in it. That's totally fine. So how do we do this then? How do we take control of our reaction and our reactivity? Again, so we're offering this framework that consists of these 6 practices. And these are things that, again, we might do in a different kind of order, or some of them, but doing it in this more formalized way, structured way, helps us to deal with these situations of not knowing, what am I supposed to do here. And I'm going to pick out one of these 6 because there's only time to give you a small taste of what PL is about. But just to kind of go through them. So attending to your judgment. What am I thinking right now? How am I judging the situation, myself or the other person? What am I feeling? What are my emotions? What is my body telling me about the situation? Sometimes I have a bodily reaction in my stomach, or maybe my hands turn warm, or my face turns red. Then I also, it's helpful to take a moment out. Cultivate stillness is what we call this 4th practice. And then before we are going to make some sort of a decision about the situation, stopping and what we call engage the ambiguity of this particular situation. And so I'm going to come back to that in a minute. And then also, before we decide, remembering how we want to be in the situation, what's our best self here, and then aligning our reaction with that vision. So that's what we call aligning with vision. So these words sound probably like mumbo jumbo perhaps to you, but they're very well thought out, and we are in the workshop going through them and doing practice around them and trying to really explore what they mean. And what makes this different from just sort of, saying to somebody, well, you just shouldn't be judging, is the word that we're choosing here, the word attending to. So attending to these things that we do, thinking, feeling, and how our body reacts, suggests that there's benefit in actually stopping and asking ourselves a number of questions about these areas, so to get information from them. So where does the judgment come from? What specifically am I expecting around, why am I having this judgment? What does the emotion feel like? What is it telling me? What does my body feel like? What does this remind me of? Where is it located in my body? So that's what makes it different from other things that you might have been reading about. And coming to our core or sort of sample practice this morning about engaging ambiguity, the keyword there is engaging. So when you hear engaging, what comes to mind, what I think about is actively using it, investigating it, exploring it. And that's really what this means, the word engaging the ambiguity of the situation. So the language we're using here to kind of explain this further is to acknowledge and realize that change and difference offer us a special moment of knowledge. It also creates a time of uncertainty and liminality. Liminality comes from the Latin word limens, and it means threshold. So it's kind of between what we know and what we don't know, what is and what was. It's this moment of in-betweenness when maybe you look at a trapeze artist, have let go of one trapeze before you catch the next trapeze. And it's in that space that we can feel great anxiety and nervousness and fear even, or we can also feel like a certain curiosity in that moment and say, okay, what comes next? What's going to happen? And in that moment, really staying a little longer and allowing, as it says here, for possibilities to arise, for knowledge to arise, getting a bit comfortable with this sense of not knowing, which is the hardest thing because all of us want to know. That's a sort of an ingrained human nature kind of need that we have. Or we jump to conclusions right away, and if there's a call coming in from a certain person, oh, that's going to be bad, right? So, but instead of doing that, stopping ourselves and pausing and asking, what do I not know here? So, and this is easy to say, harder to do, right? To remember in that moment to not jump to conclusions right away. So we're offering you some tools to do that and to remember these things. And so we use a dialogue / monologue tool called the critical moment dialogue. where we go through a series of questions to make ourselves stop and engage in this ambiguity by asking these numbers of questions. So I'll talk about this in a minute a bit more. So when you do this, what you will often notice is, you know what, you'll find a different answer than the one that you thought was going to be the answer. Just that moment of pausing, of stillness, of allowing yourself to sort of the mind to do its work, and also based on, you know, thinking about your judgments, emotions, and physical sensations, allows you to come to a different level of awareness. So by using these questions, and so the questions that we are specifically asking here are, what's the situation in which I'm experiencing ambiguity? So kind of being clear on, you know, what is really going on. Regarding the situation, what do I not know? And then the next question is, what more can I not know? And when you hear the question, you know, what do I not know? What comes to you? Well, actually, now that I think about it, you know, I don't really know what this person's motivation is that was just sort of yelling at me or sending me a nasty email. I don't know what they had going on in their life, what stress they were under, what their motivation was exactly for sending me this email, or what their boss told them to do or not to do. I have no idea. What more can I not know? Well, I'm not sure. I cannot know what they're going to do with my answer, if I answer, if I don't answer. I cannot know, frankly, what's going to happen in the next moment, right? By asking these questions, I open the window of possibility, which kind of broadens our focus and makes us act from much more information than we had before. So this is the engaging ambiguity practice, which for some practitioners of PL is the hardest, and for others it's like the juiciest one, because it lets you ask more questions and find out more information. So the process of PL is to learn these practices by actually doing them in form of this dialogue tool that we are offering. So in our workshop, we're doing this with another person, by ourselves, even in a group. And by asking these questions several times, they begin to sink in. And now that I've done this for, you know, a number of years, and I've taught this several times or many times, when I'm encountering a situation of where I'm stuck or feel that there's a conflict or don't know where I am or encountering difficulty, these questions go through my mind almost automatically, and I can call them up and use them in that moment as my tool for more information and for more wisdom. So in the class, we're practicing the information, processing it. So this is what we're going to do. If I can just talk about the class for a moment, for those of you who want to know more about it. So it moved from an in-person 2-day format to an online format where we meet 4 times, 2 hours each, with 2 days apart. So you have some time to practice, even including with a buddy from class to practice this dialogue. You're going to call each other up or do it online for, you know, each of you is going to practice this once or twice. And then there's a follow-up meeting to see how the practice is going a few weeks down the road, about 2 weeks after that. So, and what we're doing in this program is to understand the theory behind it, although there isn't really much theory, but it's sort of the history of the story of PL, to look at the potential effects of practicing it in our personal lives, interpersonal encounters and relationships, but also in our work contexts. Again, especially for people who are new leaders, to learn how to lead yourself as you're figuring out the leadership task is a very, very useful process to go through. And we're going to explore and apply the principles and practices, experiment with them in different formats. We're also developing a vision of ourselves as an effective leader, which is this is one of the pieces to be able to align your current reality with your vision. And then we'll practice this dialogue tool in several formats with each other. And of course, we talk about how do we take this whole thing home? How do we make it stick? How do we practice it away from class, because it's all good and well to do it in class, but and how do we make it last and sustain? So that's the tool, the framework we're using.
Rita,
Yeah.
oh, sorry, go ahead. There is a question, so
Okay,
just
go
when
ahead.
you're ready, we can certainly.
Okay, yeah, I'll just go a few more seconds and then I'll.
Sure.
So these are the modules. Or October 15th is when it starts. The overview, introduction, vision work, and then principles and practices, and then the following week you're doing the PL self-assessment, practicing the dialogue, and sharing the vision and taking it home. And we're using breakout rooms a lot, working in small groups, which makes it very intimate, and you can talk a lot more in the small groups and practicing this dialogue. And I think that's it. So what questions do you have for me, Mary-Eleanor?
So there was one question, and I would encourage people to submit more questions either through the chat or through the Q&A, whichever you're comfortable with. But just wondering if you can speak to how we might offer that opportunity to pause and listen and engage ambiguity in an environment where we might be using one virtual tool or multiple concurrently. Where many of us are working in kind of Teams and Zoom spaces. If you could speak to that, that would be great, and would encourage other questions to come in as well.
Yeah, so thank you for the question, Elizabeth. So when we say taking a pause or cultivating stillness, which is the language we're using here, we don't necessarily mean going for a 1 hour walk or interrupting the meeting or doing anything like that. What we're after is creating a shift, so a small gap in your sort of autopilot way of functioning. And that you can achieve by actually taking a breath, by touching something, by looking up, by looking at some picture of something that inspires you, or by, frankly speaking, going to the bathroom, or by just moving around your desk, shifting your position. So of course you can do longer things as well if you have the time. Going out for a walk is very helpful to kind of clear your mind, literally speaking, right, and kind of shifting it that way. But it's really often a moment by moment kind of shift, or creating a gap in your busyness. Like, when you're sitting at a desk, you get into the office or up to your desk at 8 in the morning and you look up and it's 4 p.m., right? Or something like that. You forgot to have lunch. That's when you're on autopilot. So interrupt that, and maybe even setting an alarm. And that we're talking about that in the class. How do I remember to do that? There's many ways of reminding you, but it doesn't have to be a long, extended pause or stillness. It can be a small sort of moment by moment kind of stillness or break or pause. That's helpful.
Rita, there's another question here. How can I embrace ambiguity when my team are looking to me to provide certainty? It can feel like a failure to say, I don't know, or I can't provide that information.
So, well, one thing from studying leadership and people like Brene Brown, who is the one that says, University of Houston, who wrote the book Dare to Lead, is that it's actually not off-putting, but actually quite useful and efficient or productive as a leader to say, I don't know, because people actually can then take a breath and say, oh, if my boss doesn't know, then I can take a breath as well, right? So admitting that you don't know, it's not necessarily a sign of weakness, but I see what you're saying. And sometimes you have to be the strong leader out there and sort of show the troops that, you are in control. So this can be an internal process where you are holding the space for ambiguity in a positive sense, as a source of learning, not something that's like you have to defeat or overcome, more as a resource. And so sometimes you might have to put out that good face and facade and say, we'll find out what's happening here, and or you can be transparent about it and say, I don't know either, but we'll find out. Or you can just sort of do it internally and not show that you're looking for it, depending on what the situation requires. But I think more often than not, when you're admitting to not knowing or engaging the ambiguity, people are quite happy and quite relieved that they get a break as well. But this really is more of an internal process that you can make external, but you don't have to. It's up to you and seeing what the situation requires.
Just a question here from Robert. Rita, can you please clarify the 2 principles you referred to?
Oh yeah, well, I was going to skip on those because we don't have enough time, but the 2 principles of PL are mindfulness and creativity, and they work sort of like a yin and a yang. They're connected. So mindfulness is very helpful because being aware of what's going on, which is what mindful is, present moment awareness, is sort of the requirement for, practicing personal leadership. And creativity asks us or invites us to use all our resources. Creativity with a small c, not the Vincent van Gogh creativity necessarily, but it's a creativity of using all your wisdoms, your intelligences, emotional, intellectual, creative intelligence, to find your right answer, to allow to allow sort of your own resources to come out. So they work together. They're interconnected. You don't have one without the other. And they used to be practices before, but then the founders felt that, they're actually in each of these practices. And so they made them the principles. They're the container around these 6 practices. But thank you for that question.
We just have time for one more.
Okay.
And I would say, I'll just take a moment to, before folks might have to leave, just that at the end of this webinar, you will be asked to just fill out a quick survey. And this is just really helpful for us to, it's 5 questions, really helpful for us to understand if you enjoyed today's webinar, what you liked most. And we will be, I've had a few questions about whether the recording will be available. We will be following up with all of you later today. And the topic that Rita covered on engaging ambiguity, there will be a worksheet. She had covered a few questions that can help guide you through engaging ambiguity. So that worksheet will also be provided in the follow-up email. So look for that later today. And we encourage you to check out the course that Rita will be teaching later in October on this topic on personal leadership. So Rita, just in the last few minutes we have, person is asking, how do you lead in a situation where everyone in your team feels that they should have been leading? And there's a very deliberate happy face included at the end of that question.
Where everybody feels that they should have been leading, is that the question? Is that what you said?
Yes, yeah. How do you lead in a situation where it seems that everyone feels that they should be the leader?
Well, again, what is your goal, right? What's your vision of yourself as a leader? Are you a collaborative leader? Can they somehow be empowered to co-lead with you or step up in certain ways? Again, it depends on what your vision is of yourself, and then how do you align that with what's, what you have in front of you? So maybe it requires talking with them, maybe it requires setting boundaries with them. This sort of depends. But your vision that you will have, if you have a vision of yourself, what kind of a leader you want to be, that'll guide you in making the decision about what to do there. That's what I want to say. So thank you so much for being here and for inviting me to do this webinar. We'll also share my information if you want to email me in this handout that Mary-Eleanor talked about. So it's time for the survey now. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you all.
All right. Thanks for coming, yes. And will you launch the survey now, Mary-Eleanor? How's it?
Yes, people should be receiving the survey when they end. Yeah.
Great.
Well, I think that went really well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are we offline now?
And there are still people attendees
yes.
there.
Say it again, Odeni. It's nice to hear. No.
I think it went really well.
Thank you.
Yes, it went well. Oh, thank you.
Yes, it went well. Thank you. FOC, Anik Po. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello from Blue Line. What's Blue Line?
Oh, fantastic. Oh, hi. Hi, Janice.
Janice Eaton.
Janice from Blue Line. We work with Janice, so that's fantastic. Yeah, yeah.
Angela Scammell.
Oh,
here.
Angela Scammell. Hi, Angela. Yeah, thank you.
Oh, Police Magazine. Oh, great.
Yeah.
Yeah, send some people from the police courses over here. That'd be great to have them.
Yeah.
I've never had a cop in my programs. I've had everybody from the entire province. I think all the different offices and departments. But okay, I will sure try. Great, Janice. We count on you. Now that you can be an ambassador, thank you. The trick is, like, you Danny will attest to this, right? The trick is to really have enough trust to take the class, because you don't really know what it's about. It's sort of like, what is this? It's very hard to explain. The same was true for me when I first started out with PL. It's like, I just went on a whim and I thought, oh, I like the people, so let me do this. And then I was like, whoa, this is so much more than I thought. And it blew me away, and it's been with me since, for 20 years now.
Yeah, it is. It is kind of a risk almost to take the initial plunge to take the course. Well, it is, because you're investing
it.
Admit on some level that you are needing this personal, that you need some kind of vision. And
that's a good way to say it. Yes, right. And then you get a big gift, right? So there's still 12 people online.
Yeah, so there are still some people who are hanging on to the webinar, which is great, which is fine. I don't think we have any more. Have some nice comments in the Q&A here, but we can probably just
would you do me a favor?
Sure.
And add my email and my phone number to this thing. Yes,
right. I will do that.
I forgot to do that. Yes, and can you send me a copy of what you sent out too, so I get it?
Yes, and I will do that. Yeah.
Okay. Well, thanks a lot, Rita.
Thank you, Rita. This was great.
Yes, it was fun working with you guys. Thank you. Okay.
Yes.
Bye.
Okay.
Bye.
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 Bye.